a very informal seminar class. The idea really is to create a lot of participation and answer questions about careers and job searches and more importantly our professional passions as well. And we're really lucky to have, in my mind, two amazing guests who can provide their perspectives on not only what they do for a living but how they got there. And from those points, we can hopefully, again, build a really great conversation as it relates to the future and finding our passions and finding our career path. The first person I'll just quickly bring on and allow him to kind of introduce himself, and then we'll move to the second guest, and then we'll open up the questions. But we'll start with Jonathan Simon, who like I said, I will allow him to kind of explain what he does for a living, and we'll have expand that conversation out a little bit more. But just to give you a bit of a rough, I guess, outline, is that Jonathan's worked in the finance world now for a number of years. He's had a number of responsibilities that he can get into, and for those of us in the audience who have thought about a career in the financial world, who thought also about a variety of challenges that we're thinking about facing in the future, I think Jonathan provides some great perspective. So as we do these sessions, I'll just start off with a real basic question. What do you do? What's your career?
Sure. So I actually am coming up on 1 year with J.P. Morgan Chase. I work in the city. As Matt said, I've been in banking my entire career since graduating from college. And right now I have a really cool job, which is to lead student strategy for an initiative our chairman and CEO launched about 20 months ago. It's called Advancing Black Leaders. And the strategy is really focused on kind of how we attract, recruit, develop, promote, and advance black talent within the firm. And it started out with him being very unequivocal that we needed to really be intentional about focusing on a black talent pipeline because we had seen, when we compare ourselves to ourselves, we had seen from a representation standpoint strong kind of momentum with women and LGBT and veterans. We built a whole veterans initiative. And so when he kind of looked at what was happening in the black talent segment and to some degree in the Hispanic talent segment, he saw that we weren't doing as well as we would like to do compared to other groups. And so he said, let's, with intentionality, put the resources around it to really have a team that solely focuses on the full spectrum of career. And so I own the front end of that spectrum, which is students. So day in and day out, I get to spend time with students like all of you, talking about opportunities in financial services and helping students, frankly, think through how to even just navigate career options, because there's lots of opportunity now for bright students like yourselves that, frankly, didn't exist when I was in school. And so when I was looking at going to college and when I was in college. So, my role is to really make sure that J.P. Morgan Chase is building a pipeline of diverse talent, so I can give you a sense of what that looks like and what we look for. But that's what I do.
Before we start down the path of how you got to this job, for those of us in the audience who are interested in finance, who are interested in corporate jobs, you obviously have a very unique niche, a very important responsibility within J.P. Morgan Chase. I guess the question that I would have for you before we start talking about how you got there is, what are the other jobs that are out there, where people in college or people about to graduate from college should be thinking about within the finance world?
So how many people watch Billions? Okay. So Billions is a show on Showtime, and it's about a guy who runs his own hedge fund. And it's a fairly typical hedge fund type scenario. Lots of men, very few women, lots of testosterone and bravado and, kind of loud, boisterous activity. And so that's one element of financial services. How many people in here have a checking account? All right. Great. When's the last time, has anybody in this room been in a branch in the past 30 days? Okay. So for those that didn't raise their hands, they probably did a financial transaction, but they didn't need to go into a branch, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other side of financial services, when you compare it to billions, is what we do on the consumer side. So everything that we do as it relates to the customer, we're now doing it in a digital way, so that inevitably you could get a check in the mail from your grandmother and take a picture of that check and deposit it in your account, never step foot in the branch. In fact, in our lobby, we launched the other day a new ATM machine. All I had was my cell phone, and I have in my wallet my Chase account. So you know your wallet within Apple, for you Apple folks, I don't know what Android, I'm sorry, I don't know what Android. But in the wallet, so all I did, my phone was locked. It was on, but it was locked. You just sit the phone on the ATM, boop, pops up, put your code in. Put your code in, goes right to your account, right? So, because it recognizes the digital card that's on my phone, it automatically picks it up. Still had to put in the 4 digits, so even if somebody stole your phone, they can't get into your account. So all of that, from the spectrum of the consumer using their fingertip to access their account to send their grandma $20, to the guy who's running a hedge fund who needs lines of credit to support that business, who needs the technology to make those trades and create arbitrage situations so he can make money. JP Morgan Chase does all of that and everything in between. Mortgages, credit cards, the technology that creates the app, the algorithms that say, this is your fingerprint, we're going to match your fingerprint with the one we have on file that's referenced to this account, and all of your information is going to pull up, right? So in order for that to happen with rapid speed, you got to have people behind the scenes programming all of that. We kind of take it for granted. You just take your phone, you put your finger, oh, it just pops up. But there's thousands of transactions that happen in milliseconds for that to happen and give you the information that you're looking for. So the movement of money in all of its forms, the creation of money, so funding new businesses, helping new businesses get off the ground, mom and pop stores, large corporations. How many of you have ever heard of Peloton Bikes? Right? Peloton Bike is a client of JP Morgan Chase. We not only bank the founders and owners of the company, but we helped the company fund itself to build more Pelotons. Shake Shack, how many have been to Shake Shack? Shake Shack is a client. We took Shake Shack from being a private company and making them a public company so they could scale and build Shake Shacks all over the country and put them in malls and wherever else you want to go. So we have opportunities across that entire spectrum for students that want to be hardcore Wall Street traders, trading derivatives, bonds, equities, interest rate swaps, whatever, all the way through to technology that helps develop the next app that allows you to transfer funds and all of the functions that support it. So none of the stuff that happens can be done without legal and compliance, audit, finance that manages the books to make sure that we're making money when we're making different investments, human resources, which is the part of the firm that I'm in. So, you know, when you think about the breadth of those things, like we've got folks, all they do every day, all day, is manage our social media presence. So when you're online and you look at Facebook or you look at LinkedIn and JP Morgan Chase ads pop up, that's somebody's job at JP Morgan Chase that does that. Now, they could have worked in another social media company or come from somewhere else, but they're doing that job today in a bank. And that's an example of a job that 15 years ago didn't exist. Nobody was sitting in an office in a bank managing the social media account.
So by my count, just as you were talking, I mean, I think I heard at least 31 that.
We've got 25 analyst programs, so yeah, that's about right.
But as someone, and knowing your bio, and actually the students now all have your bio as well, you know, your breadth, your experience runs far beyond this executive position that you currently have. You've worked in a lot of the sectors that you've just referenced. So a big part of this seminar is to really talk about the path and talk about what it took to get in the position that you're in today. So maybe for a little bit, and then we can segue over to Josh, if you could give us a little bit of a sense of your path, how you discovered your passion, where did you discover it, and what ultimately led you to the role that you're taking now within the financial industry.
Sure. So, one of the questions that you get asked, I don't think they ask it that much anymore, but they would ask a question, what do you want to do in 10 years, right? What do you want to do in 5 years? And, I find that to be one of the most difficult questions to answer, because who knows what the world's going to be in 5 years, right? If I could predict that, like I'd be like sitting on a beach somewhere because I would have made so much money because I could just call out the next lotto number. You know what I mean? So I struggle with that because I think so much of life and so much of your career is going to be based on being in the right place at the right time and having the right relationships, right? Because you can be excellent, but nobody likes you, you're not going to get the shot. Everybody could love you, you be dumb as rocks, you're not going to get the shot, right? It's got to be a marriage of those two things where you have relationships, people like you, you're smart, you have something to bring to the table, and opportunity kind of just magically unfolds. Sometimes it doesn't happen when you want it to happen. But over the course of my career, I grew up in it wasn't rural, but as I think about New Jersey, my town was rural. Small Georgia town, no one in my family had ever worked north of Atlanta. Definitely not in financial services, mostly education, farming were careers that my family participated in. So me kind of having this dream of working on Wall Street was just a dream, like seeing it, and there's a movie back in the 80s called Wall Street, and that kind of thing. Wow.
Where did that dream come from?
I think it was probably, so there were two things, right? It's like funny how things influence you as a kid. So there was a show called Family Ties with Alex P. Keaton, who was this family of 3 or 4 kids, and the son was just totally different from everybody else. Like he got up every day, he wore like a sweater and a tie, and he was a high school kid. He read the Wall Street Journal, like totally nerd, right? So man, that's kind of interesting. What's the Wall Street Journal? I knew no one that read the Wall Street Journal. I don't even know if they sold it in my town, right? So got curious with that. Then I saw Wall Street, and then it kind of went to college, and I always knew college was like the next stop after high school, because my mom had gone to college, my grandfather had gone to college, but I can actually tell you where the next sharecropper was in my family. So it wasn't like everybody in my family had been educated. Because my grandfather went to war and came back, got the GI Bill, put himself through college, and then everybody in our family after that went. And so, having that helped in terms of inspiration. But then going to college in Atlanta and being around a bunch of guys who talked about Wall Street, and the college talked about it, and the opportunities there was kind of the thing that planted the seed. And then once the seed is planted, a mind once expanded will never contract. Can you guys write that down? A mind once expanded will never contract. And what that means is, once somebody plants the seed, or you have the moment of awareness or consciousness about anything, whatever it is, right? Your mind is only going to continue to grow from where it was. So once you take your first international trip and be in another part of the world that is totally different than Bloomfield, New Jersey, your mind is just going to open up to possibilities. So I've had a lot of situations in my life where my mind was open to possibilities, and it just keeps expanding and expanding, because if you allow things to come into it, it'll make you a better person over time. So if you don't do those things to expand your mind, then you're not going to be that person that 20 years down the road, people say, man, so-and-so is interesting, right? I want to invite her to the cocktail party, or I want to invite him, or wow, we need to fill this job. Why don't we call so-and-so? So it's kind of an amalgamation of like being in the right place at the right time, setting a high bar of excellence for yourself, and then just allowing kind of the universe to do its work.
So before we move over to Josh and then open up to questions, John, you did hit a really important point, which kind of, in a way, defines the whole purpose of these seminars. You talked about the Wall Street Journal and how you didn't know anyone who read the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
So for those of us in the audience who might have or be in the process of discovering a passion, but we don't necessarily know anybody who can connect us to that passion. And in your case, the Wall Street Journal is a good example.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that challenge?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you definitely have to be resourceful. I think this forum is a great way to do that, because people know people, right? I mean, it's 6 degrees of separation is real. I mean, in certain ethnic communities, it's really 3, right? Like, you name anybody, and the older you get, you can probably say, oh yeah, I know so and so that knows so and so, right? Like, so I think it's leveraging every opportunity when you meet someone to make a connection. You have resource, nobody in this room except for the faculty and administration have ever probably picked up an encyclopedia, right? Who's picked up a encyclopedia? Yeah, I'm curious. Who knows what an encyclopedia is, right? Other than the faculty, right? Right? Have you ever had to use an encyclopedia?
My mom had it when I was younger. So.
Just like gathering dust, like everybody, funkin' wagnalls, right? So when I was a kid, like reading again, another nerdy thing to do, right? But I enjoyed reading the encyclopedia, right? Because it was like a trove of information and allowed you to go to different places and experience and learn about different things. And so you got all that at your fingertips, right? So you got an alumni of an institution that you can tap into. So I don't think of like you being so far away from virtually anything that you want to do. You just got to think about how do you leverage the people around you, whether that's faculty and administration, whether that's, obviously family members, people that you might meet through this forum, being on LinkedIn. How many people have a LinkedIn account? Okay. Having a LinkedIn account is a great way to have people, you can put your different interests, you can join different groups, and being able to connect yourself to people that have shared interests. And through those things, it just starts to, you're 1 degree, 2 degrees separated from the people that can help guide you and direct you and give you good advice.
Yeah, and it sounds like a big part of it is just putting yourself in the arena so you can create some luck.
You got to be in the game, right? You can't sit on the sidelines if you're really trying to play, talking about what you're going to do. You got to be in the game. You got to be in the flow. And if you're not in the flow, you're going to get left behind. Because it's all about information and connections. That's what the world still operates on, that despite how quickly we do it. It's still all based on connections.
So before we open it up, I do want to obviously bring Josh into the conversation. One of the great things I think about being able to set up these panels and these discussions is that we can merge and bring some great people together. And in terms of this panel, what we have, frankly, are just 2 people who are doing very noble work, whether it be trying to diversify the financial industry the way Jonathan is, but also the way Josh works and the focus that he brings to the New Jersey community as a whole. Specifically, I'll let Josh talk a little bit about what he does, but just for all of us in the audience, I think we can find ways in which our passions can merge, whether it be in the corporate sector or the not-for-profit sector. So while we obviously have 2 very diverse members of our panel today, the great thing is that there's actually a lot of similarities, I think, between what Jonathan does and what Joshua does. But Josh, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you do and what ADL is?
Sure. So, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today, Matt. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Josh Cohen. I am the Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, New Jersey office. So show of hands real quick, how many people have heard of the ADL or Anti-Defamation? All right, so real quick, right? I work for an organization that's been around for 105 years. It is a national organization with 26 regional offices that fights hate, right? We combat hate on a daily basis, right? We were founded 105 years ago with a mission to do two things, right? Combat anti-Semitism and seek fair and just treatment for all, right? So there's a dual mission. So why is there a dual mission? Because the founder of the organization said, if I'm going to start an organization to fight rampant anti-Semitism in this country, we can't just fight anti-Semitism, we have to fight all forms of hate. Because we're not going to be successful fighting anti-Semitism unless we're fighting all forms of hate. And we need to build bridges of understanding with other communities and fight for them as well. Because if they're safe, then we're safe. If we're not safe, then they're not safe. So 105 years later, guess what our mission is? To fight anti-Semitism and seek fair and just treatment for all. Now, in the 21st century, we're fighting 21st century problems, and 20th, and actually even 19th, I'll be honest with you, middle age problems too, like from the Middle Ages. But we're also using 21st century tools, right? So the mission hasn't changed. We're still a national organization that's headquartered in New York, but we have 26 offices around the country with the intent and purpose to fight hate and bigotry in communities around the country. So no matter where you go in the United States, there is an ADL office that's fighting hate. So my role as the regional director in the New Jersey office, which serves North and Central New Jersey, is we actually do the work and the advocacy and the outreach and the engagement with members of the community, Jewish and non-Jewish, black, white, Latino, regardless of your sexual identity or orientation, immigration status, religion, race. If you are the victim of hate or bias or bigotry, whether it's real or perceived, you call us. People call us. Sometimes we're the first phone call that an individual will make when they're the victims of hate. They're not going to call law enforcement, they're not going to call their pastor, they're not going to call their rabbi, they're not going to call their email. They pick up the phone and they call us because they want us to help. And if we are in a position to help people and to provide a meaningful intervention, we do it. No questions asked.
What kind of roles does a not-for-profit like yourself, Jonathan provided a great outline and joked, that there was about 31 jobs or careers that could come out of that. Tell us a little bit about when you're creating a not-for-profit, such as the one you described. What are the kind of roles that some of the students here might fit in or might be interested in beyond becoming the executive director who's in charge of everything?
So it's interesting. Does so you have two very different but almost similar fields, not-for-profit and for-profit. Do we know what not-for-profit means? What does it mean to be a non-profit organization?
Not funded by the government.
Not funded by the government? Some non-profits get government funding. That's okay. No, it's fine. Listen, shout out the answers. Does it mean like you don't make money? Non-profit?
No, you make money.
Right. So there's this idea, right, that nonprofits, like the goal is to not make money, right? You're going to do some good in the community, right? So nonprofit, just as a little segue, it's a tax designation. It basically means that individuals want to support an organization that they believe in, and they're going to invest their money to support this organization, but instead of seeing a financial return on that investment, they're going to get a social return, like a social good. They're going to feel good about that organization. So we raise lots of money, right? So within the nonprofit organization that I work for in nonprofits, I'll speak specifically about the jobs and the roles, for our nonprofit, for the ADL. There are, both on a national and local level, an enormous amount of roles and positions to actually fulfill our mission. Everything from fundraising, people who on a daily basis are asking people for money, whether it's individuals, corporations, foundations, trying to raise money to actually support the programs and services that we do on a daily basis. There are individuals who work on the media relations component, people who are writing press releases, reaching out to the media to promote the programs and services that they're doing. There are the programmatic staff. We fight hate. How do you fight hate? Well, we do it in two signature program areas. Working with law enforcement And monitoring hate and extremist groups, so like neo-Nazi skinheads, the horrible people that you saw marching in Charlottesville, like we monitor those people on a daily basis, and we keep information on them. So we have people in our office who that's their job. They're either in the field or online or through a variety of other ways that I'm not really allowed to talk about and how we monitor these hate and extremist groups. That's their job, right? They do that really sexy undercover kind of, crazy stuff, right? And like, I can't even tell you their names, and like, they don't present to the public. They work with law enforcement, and they train law enforcement on how to respond to these groups. We also feel that, one of the best ways to fight hate is through our education work, right? Cut out hate at its root by education work, starting as early as possible. We're one of the largest providers of anti-bias training in the United States. So a lot of our staff are professional educators, professionals who've been trained in issues of like diversity and inclusion, people who want to use education as a tool to fight hate. So they are either developing curriculum, going out and training teachers and students on anti-bullying and anti-bias work. We also have a ton of lawyers who work for us. And while we don't provide legal services at all, we have attorneys who work for us who draft policies, who draft model legislation, like hate crimes legislation. We have federal hate crimes legislation in this country, the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Hate Crimes Act, that was written by one of my colleagues who's an attorney. And it took 11 years to pass that piece of legislation. And it's a funny story. I mean, the reason why it took so long is because the federal government said, we'll pass Federal Hate Crimes Protections Act, but you gotta remove 4 words from your bill: sexual identity, sexual orientation. We said, no way, either everyone's covered, or we're just gonna keep fighting. Last administration, or the Obama administration, was like, yeah, sounds great, we'll sign it into law, just pass it, no problem, done. Took 11 years, but we did it. But we have people on our staff who look at law and policy around the country and on the federal level, who are writing new laws, who are writing policy briefs to get laws changed to better serve communities, to better serve vulnerable populations. A lot of my colleagues have really diverse backgrounds: lawyers, teachers, community relations professionals. I mean, you name it. And then there's also, from a nonprofit side, there are people from the business community who actually work for ADL and for other nonprofits as well. So backgrounds in finance are essential for nonprofits, whether it's the office of the chief financial officer, controllers, people who manage and invest our money, even just doing payroll, HR work, etc. Every position that you see in the for-profit world, you see in the nonprofit world. Now, not every nonprofit is created equally. There are some that are very small, or some that are very large. I happen to work for a very large nonprofit organization. I have worked for smaller ones in the past, where it's like 5 people and like you have like an office manager slash PR person, slash event planner, So my role at the ADL is, I oversee and I'm in charge of the New Jersey office. So I'm in charge of all fundraising for our region, media relations, setting the tone and the strategic direction for the office as far as programs, community relations. I oversee fact-finding research on hate groups and extremists, and working with our national colleagues, as well as, I said, fundraising and leadership development, and a whole host of other things that I'm not going to,
And I think an important takeaway too, when we're thinking about careers, when we're thinking about direction of where we want to go, the notion of a not-for-profit, very similar to a company, is that ADL is a great example, but there's also countless other not-for-profits that touch on different issues, and each of those not-profits has jobs and careers that are very similar to the ones that Josh mentioned. Before we open it up, because I know we've had a past of having a really engaging give and take in terms of answering questions, talk to us though just a little bit about the idea of discovering your passion and how it came about, and really what was the pathway into getting this current gig that you have, running arguably one of the most important not-for-profits in the state. How did you end up getting to that role?
So it's interesting. I mean, that's like 2 questions, 2 different answers. How I got to the regional director position here in New Jersey is interesting. So I've been with ADL for 8 years this past December. Spent 5 years in our Philadelphia office. And then in 2015, I was promoted and I moved up to North Jersey and I took over this office. How I got to this position was, like any other, like a lot of other stories of people in the nonprofit world, which was I worked hard, I worked long hours, and I took advantage of opportunities. And there was an opportunity that existed to take over a regional office. And there's only 26.
And this was when you were at ADL?
This is when I was at ADL. I was sitting in my office in Philadelphia.
Doing what?
I was the associate director of the Philadelphia office, and I had actually gotten to a point where I was like, this is about as good as it's going to get here, right? I've hit associate director. The regional director is not going to leave anytime soon. And I've either got to make a choice and say, I'm okay with being the associate regional director. I've created some really cool initiatives here. I've made a name for myself in the organization. But maybe it's time to move on. I started having conversations with other organizations, with people I knew in the community, and I was exploring my options. And at that same time, the phone rang, and it was the national office. And it's like, it's like the Yankees call you, and they're just like, hey, you want to come up to the national office and interview for the New Jersey Regional Director office? And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't crazy about it. Like, the office was struggling financially, no staff. It was in bad shape. It was a project. But at the same time, I said, absolutely, I definitely want to go. And I would love to interview. I'm very excited in the position. I was like, I'm really not excited in the position. But I wanted to have that conversation, right? I wanted them to know that I was serious about the organization. I'd already invested 5 years in the organization. I knew our work. I knew our content. We were at a point where the organization was about to go through massive change. Our long-term national director, who had been with the organization 50 years, 27 as the national director, was going to retire. And I knew that they were bringing in a new national director who was so outside of the box, so different. He was an entrepreneur, didn't work in the nonprofit world, founded Ethos Water, sold it to Starbucks, did a couple of other startups, was currently at that time working as the head of the Office of Social Innovation in the Obama White House. And this is the guy that they've tapped to run the largest Jewish organization that fights anti-Semitism and hate in the country. I was like, that's exciting. I'm thinking about leaving. I want to hear what the national office has to say. So I go up to the national office and we have this conversation about the position and what it's going to take. And I go out for dinner with someone in the national office, and they said they were trying to sell me on the position, and they could tell I wasn't sold. And this individual said, what's your favorite car of all time? And I said, I don't know. I'm not really a car guy. So I said, I don't know, like a 19, and I remembered my dad as a kid had a Corvette, right? He worked like a couple of summers, he saved this money, and he bought like a junker of a Corvette like in the late 60s, right? And he restored it and had this great car. And I said, yeah, a 1960 Corvette convertible. And this guy said to me, he said, imagine you're walking through the woods and you find a Corvette. There's no wheels, it's kind of rusted, it's missing some windows, but if you invest your time and your effort, you can rebuild it and it's yours. And it can be yours just like that. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then I got on the train going back to Philadelphia, and I thought, I don't want to drive my father's car. I want to build the next Tesla, right? I want to innovate. I want to do something exciting. My dad's car is cool. That's exciting. That's great. That's his car. That's another generation. I want to help rebuild the New Jersey office for a new generation. So I'm going to build the next Tesla of nonprofit organizations and treat this like a startup.
So I think what's really interesting about that story, Josh, and let me let you respond, is that one of the things that Jonathan was talking about when I was grilling him on his how he got to his role. One of the big things I think that Jonathan was talking about was the importance of being in the arena and creating luck for yourself and engaging. And I think it sounds like your takeaway might be a little bit different.
Well, I have another thing to say about
go
that.
ahead, yeah.
So it's interesting how I ended up at ADL, right? I didn't get a chance to. I'm sorry if I'm a little long-winded in explaining this. I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York, and I went to school in upstate New York and ended up in New York City working for a nonprofit organization with the idea that I was going to go to law school. You know, I'd work at this nonprofit and then go to law school. It's a great model, particularly if you want to do like public interest type of work, right? And I ended up not going to law school, and I had like this great career in New York, and for a number of reasons, mostly because I got married, and my wife convinced me to move to Philadelphia. And I was working for this small child advocacy organization, and it was okay, and I wasn't really crazy about it. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more meaningful and more purposeful and had a larger impact. And I go to a town hall meeting on the Affordable Care Act. A couple, you know, however many years ago, you might remember from the news that they were debating this idea of the Affordable Care Act, affectionately known as Obamacare, right? And this was like the rise of the Tea Party movement in the United States. These town halls where you would go and you would talk to your congressperson turned into like absolute chaos, and these individuals would come and they would be disruptive. So I go to one of these town halls, and while I'm online to go see a Republican and a Democrat have a civil conversation about what does healthcare reform look like in the United States, there is a guy standing outside the building, and he's got a picture of President Obama dressed as Hitler. And I was like, okay. So number one, right? I don't care what your politics are, not even close, right? Not even close. And people are online outside this church, and they're murmuring and they're talking, oh, it was really offensive and everything. So maybe because I have a big mouth, I'm like, you know, I actually said something. I said, you know, I think what you're doing is really offensive. He said, I have freedom of speech, I can do whatever I want. I said, yes, you can. But I want you to know that what you're doing, the comparison, it's not fair, right? Comparing the President of the United States to Hitler to score a political point, totally inappropriate. Minimizes the crimes of Nazis, minimizes the impact it had on not just Jews, but non-Jews who were killed during the Holocaust, and also the memory of those who survived, right? Let's have hard conversations about things like healthcare, but let's do it in a civil way. He said, well, I have, a constitutional right. I was like, yeah, I get it. You have a constitutional right to stand outside and be a jerk. But you could go inside and listen and then make an informed decision. A bunch of people like clap their hands and everything. It's like going. 2 days later, there's an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer by a guy named Barry Morrison, who is the regional director of ADL's Philadelphia office. And he pretty much said the exact same thing, in a more refined way, that I said. And I said, you know what, thank God for organizations like the ADL, right? Calling it like they see it, being a voice of reason, amazing. I said, I'm really not crazy about my job. If something ever opened up at the ADL, I would totally apply for it. 6 months later, I was the assistant director in that office. Wow. Because I took advantage, I got lucky, and I took advantage of an opportunity. I kept checking ADL's website, and that's one of the things about the nonprofit world is like, you find your passion, you find the organization, you find the field that you're interested, whether it's like healthcare, combating hate, maybe there's a disease that you want to, help, eradicate. It's finding those organizations and where your personal values lie, where you can then make a career out of advocating for something that you're deeply passionate about. And I mean, that's really cool. The fact that, like, at the end of the day, yes, I'm executive director of the ADL's New Jersey office, and I run this nonprofit. But like, I mean, I kind of like pinch myself. Like, I get paid, and my job is to be an advocate for good stuff in the community, right? Like to affect positive change, and like that's my career. That's pretty damn amazing.
It is. It totally is. So on that note, I think we've gotten a good understanding, thankfully, of our two guests. I know that there'll be a lot of questions, both about the careers, but also, like we've had before, just challenges that all of us have faced as it relates to discovering our passions, challenges or questions that we may have about the workplace. And I'll just open it up for any questions. Who will be the first? Bring it on. Oh, come on. Last time it was just crazy. All right, well, let me go back to something for both of us, and if the group is going to stay quiet, maybe we'll cut out a little early. But a couple of quick things. So Jonathan, one of the things that Jonathan was talking about the most, which I found really interesting, which was this notion of being in the arena so you can create luck for yourself. Josh, it sounds also like when you go into the arena, you can be tested and ultimately inspired to go to zig and zag and go into different jobs. And knowing Jonathan's background, I know Jonathan has, as we were talking about before, has done a lot of really great work in the financial sector. It sounds like you've reached a lot of inspiration just by having those interviews or being in that meeting or seeing that person who bothers you. Give me a sense a little bit about, not just about creating luck, but in terms of using the arena to kind of test yourself and discover your passions a little bit. Do you have any either stories or background on that, either of you guys? Maybe Jonathan, I'll start with you since you haven't, since we were just with Josh, but give me a sense of how you might have used the arena to kind of get inspired or discover your passions.
Yeah, I think one of the things I didn't say is that, you've got to build, I alluded to it, but I'll be more explicit, you have to build kind of credibility and street cred, whatever it is that you decide to do. So you got to pay your dues, right? And that's in any field, whether you're, ultimately wanting to become an executive director of a nonprofit or wanting to become a doctor, you got to pay your dues. Or whether you want to become a musician or a producer, you gotta be in this phase of like just grinding, right? And being able to show people and demonstrate to people that you really want it and that you're well intentioned. And so, I think throughout my career, it's always been where I've surrounded myself with people that kind of had a shared ambition, because it's really that circle of influence and those people that are in your sphere that can motivate you, that can inspire you, that can keep you pushing forward. And I think it's, so having that kind of mindset, knowing that, to get to wherever it is that you want to be ultimately in your career, or you need to spend that time paying your dues. It's going to take time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so I also find, very interestingly, that you can have a career, which is your day job and what pays you and allows you to do great things, but you can also have a personal life outside of your career where you could be involved with a nonprofit, right? So as an example, although I work at JP Morgan and have this job that, frankly, I couldn't have written a better job on a sheet of paper that aligns with all my passions and my interests, I'm involved in the community in a number of other nonprofits. So I actually sit on a board, to help an organization think about how to do its great work in the community. So you can kind of think about life as having really two elements to it, really three or four. You can expand it to as many dimensions as you want, but really being able to do things in your community, participate in a nonprofit, as well as have a successful career. So I think, over the course of my career journey, it's really always been about surrounding myself with people that challenge me and push me forward and kind of show me new opportunities and have me kind of stretch beyond my wildest dreams.
That's awesome. Josh, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I'm not going to repeat what you just said, because I completely agree. I mean, well, actually I will a little bit. I mean, to surround yourself around like-minded peers, whether it's internal in your organization that you work for, or even outside, to have those types of networks, and to check in regularly. One of the best things that I do in my role is I have a weekly conference call with the regional director from the Connecticut office, because our offices kind of look the same, suburban communities. We have similar challenges, so we check in with each other once a week. We have, we've shared our professional goals for the year. We keep each other honest. We challenge and we push one another to achieve our goals and to think about things in a totally new way. And that's really helpful for me. The other thing that I want to stress, what's really important, particularly in my career, was I've been really fortunate. I've had great mentors. supervisors who have helped nurture and develop my career. Now, a lot of it was on me, right? Like I had to, really put in the time and the effort, but I was very fortunate to have supervisors who were more than just a boss, right? They were concerned and cared about me and my professional development and career. And I may not work with them now, but I still talk to them. One of my mentors, like I was just at her apartment in New York City, and we spent 2.5 hours, and we talked about everything from my kids to what do I want to get out of my job currently, and where am I going, and how am I going to get to my ultimate goal, and how can she be helpful, right? That's one of the best things that a mentor can say is, how can I help? And I've been really fortunate to have had mentors.
How did you find those mentors?
So I was lucky in that I didn't have to actually seek them out. They were actually my supervisors. I was lucky to have supervisors who sort of transcended the idea of, or the role of boss. So the first job I had in New York City, my mentor, Anita, to this day still serves as a mentor. When I got hired by that guy, Barry, in Philadelphia, Barry has since retired from the ADL. I probably talk to him at least once every other month. Whether it's an email or a phone call, or if I'm in the Philadelphia area, we meet at his favorite diner and we go and we sort of talk about a lot of things. These have been models for leadership for me. So I've noticed that they had a lot of similar traits in their management style.
But I do want to break in on that for a second, because we're not all fortunate, obviously, to either have role models in our workplace or in our family or our friends.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I talk a lot about, and maybe you guys can touch on this a little bit, is that part of being in the arena, part of finding your passion, is also not being afraid to ask.
That's true.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And what I mean by that is, if you want to build a relationship with someone, if you see value from somebody, in a lot of ways it can be reciprocated as well, right? So part of it is if you don't have that direct line to somebody,
Right.
I think personally, I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but I think there is it is appropriate to ask.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that.
I totally agree. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, right? Whether it's help finishing a project or help getting access to an individual or an organization. So I want to build a financial partnership with a major corporation. And by financial partnership, I say I want to raise money for my organization from a major foundation, right? I don't know the head of the foundation, but I know somebody that does. So I'm going to ask my colleague, my friend, who does not work for my organization, to facilitate an introduction. And they will facilitate that introduction. Now, after that, it's on me, right? I have to sell my organization. But I have no problem utilizing my network of personal and professional contacts to try and achieve my goals. Just like if a friend or a colleague were to come to me and say, hey, you know so-and-so? Can you introduce me? Absolutely, sure. I think that's...
How do you feel about that, John?
Now, wait, I just want to say, it does, I don't do it for everyone. If it's people that I have relationships with and I believe in and their organizations and et cetera, then there's that back and forth, yeah.
So the question was mentorship?
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly important. I think organic mentorship is the best, and what I mean by that is where somebody knows you or has an interest to invest and pour into you to see you be successful. And that could be someone that you're working with, that could be someone in your church or your synagogue or your mosque, or it could be a family member. But I think, aspirationally having someone in your life who can help you think through major decisions, bless you, help you think through major decisions, because you can't, this whole thing of career and even life, I don't think it is something that should be navigated alone. You need people in your life who can give you perspective and insight, and frankly, you need people who will tell you the truth. We tend to surround ourselves with a lot of people who kind of regurgitate what we think or what they think we want to hear, right? But it's those people, those friends, that are the ones that will challenge you on your stuff, right? And make you bring your A game versus the friend that just kind of goes along to get along. So making sure you always have kind of a nice mix of people in your lives who really can help you keep it on the straight and narrow. I had a question for the group. Why are you guys here? Other than for obviously free cookies and lemonade. Can anybody tell me why they're here?
I do press for the college, and this is press worthy.
Okay, well that wasn't. So
You're the target
you're here for work.
Well, I came here because I wanted to learn more about J.P. Morgan. They sent out your bio and did some research on my own, and I wanted to find out more about what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, that's good. I want to make sure we're living up to your expectations.
Alright, I just got finished taking my senior picture, so I was walking, I saw Dr. Lammy, and he told me this is information I might could use.
Mhm.
And I have a friend that's a finance major, he graduated MA, so I wanted to come gather some information for him.
Oh, good. So you're the kind of friend that people need to have in their lives.
I believe so.
How about anyone else?
Ladies in the room? Yes.
I came because I got an email and I saw the flyer and it was like a quote on it that said failure, the true meaning of leadership basically, and I wanted to learn more of it because I'm like a leadership kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me it's for educational purposes. I think information is powerful,
Yeah,
and once you gather that information and you take it and utilize it.
yeah.
I don't believe that you should just get information and just let it sit.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that you should let that empower you to do something with it. And I think listening to other people and hearing their stories also serves as inspiration.
Right.
And so both of you have definitely inspired me. And I certainly hope that this connection doesn't end today,
Yeah.
but utilizing you as a future contact
Yeah.
for more information.
Sure. No, I think your point is spot on. I think, these kinds of sessions, I was telling the dean earlier when I was in college, we had this kind of session required every Thursday, 11 o'clock, required, like it's a grade. So fortunately, no one said we're here because we're getting graded. You're all kind of here because you're just opting in, you got an email, you want to help out a friend, you're interested in finance, you saw J.P. Morgan, but I think the fact that you're all kind of you're initiating to be here on your own accord to gather that knowledge, to better yourselves, I think it's pretty powerful. I think I probably still would have gone to those seminars had I not gotten a grade for it, because some of the greatest aha moments that I had in college was participating every Thursday for 4 years in those seminars. And it ranged. I mean, it could have been, an alum of the college speaking about his career, or it could have been Desmond Tutu, right? You never know. You walk in, you don't know who you're going to get, right? Once it was Nelson Mandela. Like, that's not the Thursday you want to miss. You know what I mean? So I think these moments to be able to hear other perspectives, number one, affirms that your journey, whatever your journey is a shared journey. Somebody else out there has the same story, right? You're not the only one. That you don't have a patent on struggle. You don't have a patent on I'm a first generation. You don't have a patent, like, everybody has that layer of themselves that they can talk about how they have had to overcome adversity. Obviously, some of us have a lot more of it than others, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to figure this thing out called life. And for everyone, no matter how high you get in a corporate job, no matter how many zeros you have on your check, still trying to figure it out, right? You ever wonder why, like, people in Hollywood and people in the music industry, like, have the craziest lives? Like, you're thinking, if I had all that money, like, I wouldn't be crazy, I wouldn't wild out, I wouldn't do, but that's just how life works, right? It's not like, life throws a lot of different things at you, and it tests you, and it puts you in situations and brings people into your lives that take from you and put back into you. So life is just this long journey that you constantly have to struggle and navigate and push through, and you can only do that with having the right people around you to support.
That's so true. What I'm going to try to do one more time because we're up to our hour.
Oh, they're gonna have questions.
Sometimes we go beyond the hour, but I just want to emphasize, it's a rare moment that you're going to be able to talk to a senior executive at Citi and a senior...
Former Citi, JP Morgan.
Excuse me, sorry. I'm getting it all. It's all... And then obviously having such an important leader, a community leader in Josh and the work that he does at ADL. So I would ask you guys, use it. You guys have any questions at all? Yeah, go ahead, please.
When you guys graduated college, did you know exactly, like, is this exactly what you wanted to do, like be a director at JP Morgan?
No.
In ADL?
No. In fact, when I went to college, I wanted to be a physician. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. And then my freshman year, I changed my major to finance, and then I knew I wanted to be on Wall Street. And then once I got into, which I didn't, Matt's earlier question was asking about this, but I didn't give you the details. So, you know, I spent most of the early part of my career and even in the middle years of my career as a banker. So I was a healthcare banker. I've covered industrials. So when you think about Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, all those companies, you know, fund themselves. They have to borrow money. They have cash on their balance sheet. They're doing business around the world in different countries. So I was the banker that had the responsibility to cover those companies. And I loved helping those companies solve their most complex financial challenges. So whether it's company A wants to buy company B, and how do you bring those two companies together, and how's the company going to benefit from adding to the product line, and what is it going to cost, and figuring all of that out and how that impacted the balance sheet excited me. It was also a part of me that was excited by helping the firm recruit talent, helping the firm go back to campus to find talented folks to come, just like I did, and start their career. And so I've always kind of grown up with a pay it forward mentality, being able to help others. And so I said at some point in my career, I want to play a role in either helping the organization become more diverse. And at the time, it wasn't JP Morgan. I spent 12 years at Citigroup before joining JP Morgan last year. But helping the company become more diverse, you know, making sure that I'm creating the right kind of culture and helping the firm create the right kind of culture where talent of all backgrounds can come and be successful. Because I know what it's like to be the black kid from Georgia working on a team in Wall Street and the whole team is white. And you're the only black kid there, and nobody's coming by in the morning to see how you're doing, and nobody's helping you with the model, nobody's helping you with the PowerPoint, you're not getting invited to drinks after work, and you just got to perform like everybody else and deal with all of that stuff all at the same time. So I know what that's like to be really the outsider and trying to figure out how to operate and bring excellence and deliver at the same time, and bearing all of that weight. That's a lot to carry. And so I really, you know, having had that experience, have had opportunities I took a diversity job at Citigroup and ran that for 4 years to really help the business create much more of a much more diverse culture. And then when I was thinking about leaving Citi, I was looking at a lot of opportunities in the marketplace, and this opportunity at JP Morgan found me. So I wasn't looking to go to JP Morgan. This job that I have now didn't even exist. It was a brand new job. And so it just happened to be someone who knew me, said, hey, we got this job. You might want to come take a look at it, right? So again, back to my earlier point about having people in your sphere and in your circle that can help you when you need opportunity, when you need access, and they'll help create that access. So no, I never, like I said, if I could predict what's going to happen, heck, tomorrow, I'd be a very, very wealthy man. But you just don't know. You try to line up yourself with the right friends, influencers, relationships, mentors, be smart, do your best, right? You got to have good grades. I mean, when we look at resumes, I just went through a process of a freshman program and sophomore program for Black and Hispanic students. Minimum GPA for the freshmen is a 3.4, minimum GPA for the sophomores is a 3.2, and you have to write an essay. I can tell you how many students applied, great GPAs, essays were awful. Can't write. Like literally, cannot write. So that's the shot. They had the shot, and all I asked was for a maximum of 350 words. It's not a lot of writing. And if you don't take the chance to like reread, I had kids send me the wrong essay. Like, you got this shot, and you just gonna like, all you had to do was find the file, click on it, attach it, download it, and you sent me a file from a history class. Like that, like, and you want this? So, you know. Yeah.
Pertaining to what type of talent specifically do you search for?
All kinds. So I'm looking for our minimum GPA for any job at JP Morgan Chase for an entering college student is a 3.2. I don't care what your major is. So everything from coding to working in a branch to being an investment banker to being in private wealth management to working in our community banking team, 25 analyst programs, you got to have that minimum GPA, 3.2. You got to be able to sell yourself. You got to be able to walk into a room, shake hands with somebody, and sit down and tell them your story, look them eye to eye.
Jonathan, if you don't know how to do that, what's a way to learn?
All right, so I would say next time this group gets together, you guys sit across from each other, you need to practice. You sit in the dorm room, you got a brew and some chips, you and your homies need to practice. Ask me some questions. That's what we did. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where are you from? Why'd you pick Bloomfield College? What's your major? Like, that stuff you just gotta know. You need to think about, why did I pick Bloomfield College? Like, so you gotta practice. You can't do anything without practicing, right? And so use the time when you're sitting up watching whatever you're watching or tweeting or what, right? To think about, if I'm gonna be on this path for career, and it depends, like, I can't remember the rapper, you guys will probably know better than me, but there are levels to this, right? You pick the level you wanna be on. You got the option. Like, being in this room right now is going to give you access to a lot of levels. You could be at home right now, sitting on the couch, doing nothing. That kind of establishes what level you're going to have access to. But you're in this room, so that opens you up to the levels. And where you want to take it is solely on you. It's solely on you. I met a student last summer who is the youngest African American ever admitted to Northwestern University. He was 15 years old, started a sneaker company that grossed $10 million in sales. He's a sophomore. Grossed $10 million in sales. My son has bought sneakers from this kid. I was like, Jackson, do you know such and such? He's like, oh yeah, that's the site I get my Jordans on. This kid. At a banking seminar that we hosted for sophomores, for youngest African American student ever admitted to Northwestern, runs a sneaker company, $10 million in sales, and can code like nobody's business.
Wow.
Levels. And there's some students sitting in class next to him, 19 years old, no business, barely got into the program, but they're there. It's levels. So wherever you want to take it, the opportunity is there, right? And that's leveraging the conversations like this, that's engaging, that's getting your resume together, that's being on LinkedIn. You want to work at JP Morgan? Go check out the website. What's on the website? What do I qualify? Where's my GPA? If I'm interested in going into production, TV production, do I need to have a 3.2? Do I need to have a 3.0? What do I need to do to make sure I'm prepared to get myself in the arena? Because you can have all the dreams in the world, unless your family's just sitting on a bunch of dough. You can't put yourself in that arena without your own blood, sweat, and tears, unless somebody's just going to cut you a check and make it happen for you. Question in the back.
I'm sorry, I'm a staff member, and I just wanted to quickly add to what you were saying. I'm the Director of Career Services here at Bloomfield College, and I just wanted to say that part of networking is going to a Career Services Center, because we do have programs where you can actually network with professionals, you can do one-on-one mock interviews, and so I'm going to be here, I have my card, you can follow up with me. And just a quick shameless plug, on April 24th we're going to have a dining etiquette networking event. And so I'm happy to, I don't know, send the information via email, but those are opportunities where you can actually practice your networking skills over a free meal. So, just use the services around campus, especially career development. So.
Great.
And can I just add a quick point to that? Because this, like what she is saying, how many people is your first time knowing who she is? Like everybody knew who that, everybody knows her?
She's newly
I'm
hired.
very sure.
All right, so the reason I'm saying it is because if you're on college campus and you're trying to work in corporate America, you need to know who the career services person is. If you want to go to law school, med school, there's probably somebody else that can help you with that. But if you're trying to get a job and be on a career track in corporate America, gotta know her. The reason why that session next week with the etiquette and dining is so important is because there will be times when you are sitting at a table and your ability to get the offer or not get the offer is dependent on your ability to sit at a table, hold a fork and a glass, and talk to the person to your left, talk to the person to your right, without spilling food all over yourself. Nobody wants to hire that. To walk in with decorum, shake hands, say, my name is blah, blah, blah from Bloomfield College, how are you doing, right? And it's also having something to say. Right? Reading the paper, being current on events and know what's going on in the world, right? Like everybody in this room, I could probably toss out the names of random songs and you could probably finish the end of it, because I do this all the time when I'm talking to college students. I'll ask them, what was the name of Drake's last album? Lil Uzi Vert's last song was what? That hit the top, and everybody can just spout them off. Then I say, okay, how many points did the Dow crash yesterday? Or was the Dow up or down? How many stocks are in the Dow Jones Industrial? And they're sitting there looking at me like, so I'm like, you're in a financial services conversation, wanting to work at JP Chase. You can tell me everything there is to know about Lil Uzi Vert and Cardi B, but you can't tell me basic financial services questions. That's the arena. Knowing Cardi B did a track with so-and-so is not going to get you the job at JP Morgan. It's just not. We're not asking cultural awareness questions, right? So, but sessions like next week where you have 4 forks on this side, 3 knives, and 4 glasses, which one do you use? Where's the bread? Which side is the bread on? Where's your napkin? Which napkin is yours? And you're sitting there going, or do you say, let me go to that session next week? So if I ever have to go to a reception where me getting the offer is dependent really on how they're assessing me at that cocktail party, I might want to know that.
Mr. Simon's going to be publicizing the Career Center for Bloomfield College.
It's awesome. That's great. I'm glad you're here.
Guys, from the students, any other questions? We are running a bit out of time. We're over the hour, but I think we could extend it if there are meaningful questions and points that anyone would like to make. Again, I'll just emphasize this for my own sake. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is building an environment here, a repetitive environment here, where questions can be asked no matter what the questions are, to be in a position where there's trust and respect. So there are no bad questions to ask. Use these guys as much as you need to. If you have a thought in your brain that you might be embarrassed to mention about, it's okay. This is the place to do it. There are no bad questions, there are no wrong questions, there are no stupid questions. So again, I think we've had a lot of great input from the audience, but from a muscle building standpoint, in terms of why we're doing this session, why we're doing these sessions, it's really to be in a position where there's trust. So don't be embarrassed. If you have a question, please ask.
Can you talk about some of the successful characteristics that an investment banker possesses?
I would say the ability to work under stress, very comfortable with working long hours, an analytical mind, a high attention to detail. And then, I think an intellectual curiosity about helping clients solve their problems. So I always ask students as they are thinking about financial services, to look beyond investment banking and consider all the options of opportunity, because there's a wide spectrum. And at some point in your career, maybe you've already done it, you'll do what's called a Myers-Briggs, which will tell you your personality, right? Not every personality is meant to work in every kind of job. So you got to think about how your personality fits. And I'll just give you an example. My first few years as an analyst, I was working, it was a Friday afternoon, like 2 o'clock. I had plans to go to my first college homecoming. It was all laid out. Associate comes over and says, hey, we got this deal we're working on. We need you to do these numbers, blah, 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 because we're going to run this and we need to get it to the client tomorrow morning. I'm like, wait a minute, my flight leaves in 2 hours, right? But that's investment banking. Like, your whole life is depending on what that client wants to do. You can have your whole weekend planned out. I've known people who have to get their weddings canceled. I've known people who have had difficulty getting to their funeral of a family member, right? Because in some cultures, at certain firms, absolute, like, no tolerance for anything other than you working as an analyst and grinding it out. So you got to assess the culture as well, the fit of the organization, because not all organizations are that bad, right? And I think Wall Street generally has evolved, and so it's not quite as strict as it once was. Like, they actually support you having a life outside of work, because they realize the person isn't well-rounded if we're just working them to death and don't give them that freedom. But those characteristics, I think, are the ones that really stand out as the dominant, analytical, really a hunger for being able to work in an environment where it's a client and truly client-centric, client-demand business.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a question about the ADL though. I was just wondering how things shifted in your company about managing bias and stuff ever since Trump has got in. Has it changed the atmosphere or how you do things in the company? Has it increased? Like what?
Loaded question.
That's an incredible question and a really great question. So let me just see if I understand it correctly. You're talking about the impact of Trump,
right,
in American political and social culture and how it might have affected our work?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So it's funny, I got like a very similar question at a synagogue where like an 80-year-old woman asked me, she said all the increases in hate and anti-Semitism. I said, yes. She goes, and she's like, is it Trump? And I'm, so anyway, so my organization has done a fantastic job over 105 years of delegitimizing hate, right? Pushing it to the fringe of society, right? Hate, anti-Semites, racists, they never went away. We didn't get rid of them. But what we did was we delegitimized them, right? It's not normal, right, to hate, right? And if you do, we're going to call you out on it. We're going to shame you in public. Corporations don't invest in hate anymore, right? Like Ford Motor Cars, right? Ford, right? The guy that founded Ford, Henry Ford, was an anti-Semite. He wrote a book called, On the Jews. You can find it on the internet, right? That just doesn't exist in this day and age, right? Doors that were shut to certain communities are now open, and our organization has done this amazing job delegitimizing hate. So we push these people to the fringe of society, and now what we see is a group of individuals and groups who now feel empowered and emboldened to not just say, but to do things. And the current political culture definitely plays a role in that. You can't deny it. When you have a president of the United States who, and I just want to say that we are a nonpartisan organization, right? We don't endorse candidates, we don't support candidates, we don't say, go vote for someone, don't vote for someone, right? Legally we can't, and we don't. We do call out politicians, and we do call out elected officials when we feel that they have crossed the line, when they have said or when they say or do things that are contrary to our policies. So it's always about policies and priorities and not politics for us. So if you do something great, we're going to pat you on the back. If you do something that we don't like that's contrary to our values as an organization, we're going to let you and probably the rest of the world know about it, right? So we have a president, President of the United States, who has not been helpful, right? On a variety of different topics and a variety of different issues. and has empowered and emboldened, an old generation of racists and bigots, as well as an entirely new generation, right? Individuals that, we push to the fringe, people like David Duke, right? You know who David Duke is, right? Former KKK, used to be on television in the 70s and 80s, in the 90s, and was sort of like pushed to the fringe, right? Nobody was really hearing from him. And now suddenly he has a platform again, right? He's on CNN. He's being seen on, international media, promoting his agenda. And he has inspired, and these words that you see from our elected leaders have inspired an entirely new generation of white supremacists and bigots. You might hear in the media this idea of the alt-right. You know about this term, the alt-right? I got news for you. Alt-right, that's a fancy branded version. It means white supremacist, white nationalist, racist, and bigot. You can call it alt-right. I'm going to call it what it is. You're a white supremacist, right? Richard Spencer says, he's a member of the alt-right. He's a bigot. He's a white supremacist. What he did was, they listened to, the generation before them, right? David Duke, classic racist and bigots from the 70s and 80s. They would say to kids, don't shave your head, stop yelling white power, go to college, get a degree, get law degrees, join the army, free paramilitary training, right? Run for the school board, run for various things in your local office, but be a productive member of society. And let's change the debate and change our language a little bit. So you'll never hear someone scream at a rally with a shaved head, white power. But what you will see is you'll see a white guy with some fancy haircut where it's shaved underneath and he's wearing a suit and tie and he talks about, I'm here to celebrate my Nordic heritage, right? Rebranding, right? He rebranded hate, right? Sort of like we don't wear polyester, we wear microfiber. We don't buy used cars, we buy pre-owned cars, right? The town I live in, nobody would get a variance to build a liquor store, but if you want to build a wine and spirit shop, that'd be okay, right? It's like the same thing. So, when you have elected leaders who are using memes and online tools and using social media, using the same things that white supremacists are doing, that's harmful. That's harmful to the communities that they're targeting, and just for democracy in general. So yeah, we've been busier than ever.
But I would challenge the notion that hate was on the fringe.
Well, no, I want to...
Yeah, because I think hate, for anybody that's black and brown,
sure,
exists and manifests itself in many different ways. That's not necessarily a Klansman ride on the back of a horse with a flag, right?
So let me rephrase. I'm speaking in terms of anti-Semitism, right? So if we look at hate crime statistics, sure, no, and the experience of Black Americans in the United States, absolutely, right? Hate, it's never disappeared.
Right.
It's manifested itself in different ways. And I apologize. I was speaking in terms of as an organization that monitors anti-Semitism, where we've seen as far as anti-Semitism. No, yeah, the spike that we've seen over the past 2 years. Sure.
So you think there's been a spike in anti-Semitism versus other forms of hate to other groups? Do you think there's been an increase in anti-Semitism relative to other, hate toward other ethnic groups?
So what we know is historically is that anti-Semitism has been a barometer for hate, for other types of hate. So when you see an increase in anti-Semitism, you see an increase in other forms of hate. So over the past 2 years, we've seen a huge increase in anti-Semitic incidents in this country, right? What else have we seen? A huge increase in anti-Semitic incidents directed at the Muslim community, at the LGBT community. And what do you think when the FBI releases their hate crime statistics? What is the #1 hate crime that's listed in there? Race-based attacks against the African American community. Religious attacks. What do you think the #1 targeted group is?
Muslims.
It's actually Jews. Muslims comes in at #2. And we've seen this, historically. We've also seen, we're able to track this data, right? So in 2017, every year we put out something called the Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents, right? So we know that in 2017, We saw the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States since the 90s. It was a 57% increase from the year prior. New Jersey, 32% increase in incidents. Majority, not a majority, but 30% of the incidents, anti-Semitic incidents that happen in New Jersey are in public schools. Anti-Semitic bullying.
Yeah.
And we know that for every incident that's reported, a number go unreported, and we also know that for every anti-Semitic incident that's reported or unreported, there are other issues that are happening. So when we get a phone call about an anti-Semitic incident in a public school, my first question is, tell me about the demographics of your school. Because if Jewish students are being targeted, other students are being targeted. Whether it's black students, Latino students, students based on their sexual identity or orientation, their immigration status.
Otherism.
Otherism, right? So that's always been, anti-Semitism has always been this barometer for other forms of hate.
So this is actually an amazing addendum to our conversation in terms of understanding where we are right now as a country, as a society. If I could, let me just bring it back for a second in terms of other questions regarding career and profession. Certainly I think our two guests, or at least I know Jonathan will have a little bit of time to stay for a little bit longer if we want to do anything informal and just one-on-one. But let me just ask, are there any other questions out there from the audience? So guys, one thing I'll just put a plug in for, as I've said before, the success of this, at least preliminarily right now, with this seminar is really by word of mouth. And I think we've had some really incredible sessions, hopefully inspiring and certainly educational. And I would just ask, as we continue this into the spring, we have, I think, at least 2, maybe, I can't remember, maybe 3 actually, to go. Spread the word. Let your friends know about this. I mean, obviously, the word is getting out. Obviously, the value proposition is there. But this is, I think what Jonathan said, this is really what you guys make of it and what your friends and colleagues and fellow students make of it. So please help us let us know. Jonathan,
Do they tell you do they give you suggestions on who they'd like to hear from? Not specific people, but say, we'd love to hear from somebody who does X.
if anyone has any suggestions, I would say
Would that be helpful to the group?
Yeah.
I don't want to change the program. I'm just.
Jonathan, you can just take it over.
I'm just trying to say, because it needs, Matt has a great Rolodex, and he's just pulling people together and pairing them up. But this is your platform, right? For you to make the most out of this, right? So he's not necessarily guessing, but you tell him, what do you want to, what would you like to hear?
So a couple things on that. Certainly, obviously, we can have a conversation about that now. Also, your office, Student Affairs, has been instrumental in setting up these seminars, so you can definitely reach out to them. And then I haven't seen the bio sheet that went out. This is the first time we've actually sent them around. But I think when I sent out the bios to Student Affairs, I asked for my email to be on it. So if my email is on it, you can show me you can send me an email anytime. If not, it's Matthew@mdfstrategies.com. So M is in Matthew, D is in David, F is in Frankel. So it's Matthew@mdfstrategies.com. Again, I'm not sure if it's on the bio, but it should be. But to John's point, which I value greatly, and I know the college values greatly, give us some input. Absolutely. I do have a pretty good Rolodex, and couldn't bring additional folks in if that is the will of the group. So certainly I value your feedback and your input as well. But having said that, we are running a bit late, so I'm gonna
I just have one housekeeping
Yeah.
item. I really thank all of you for being here. Let's give our guest speakers a round of applause. This is our first time doing the speaker series.